Hi guys, Charlie Black 20 back again with Carlos.
How you doing, guys?
And today we are doing a somewhat historical but also philosophical discussion video on
The roots of anti-Semitism and where it came from, and how it was founded, and how it got pushed into being this big ideological hatred towards the Jewish people.
and we will also cover parts of the Holocaust through this because I think we would all agree that is one of the greatest tragedies to befall the world and especially the Jewish people.
Agreed.
Now, Carlos, you wanted to start with where anti-Semitism comes from, correct?
Exactly, the roots and the foundations of those ideas.
All right. Based on everything I've learned, all the studying I've done, all the lectures I've watched, it appears to me that anti-Semitism as a root cause came from the Roman Catholic Church. Now, I'm not blaming today's Catholic Church. Please don't worry about
But
that.
religion played a large part in the majority of the world that
That is-
Christianity dominated at that time.
Yes, during the time of the Romans, when the Roman Empire became Christian, and after that, over many, many centuries, Christians put Jews into various boxes, both philosophical, legal, economic, and especially physical boxes, which we call ghettos.
Correct.
And the reason was not to exterminate or destroy Jews. It was to separate them from the Christian faith. The idea was that the Jews were the people who said no thank you to the Christian religion. There were a lot of ideas that Christianity pushed and traditions they did not keep that Jews did. For example, Christians did not have to stay kosher, and another one that was very popular among the men, I'm sure, is that they did not have to get circumcised. I don't know much about that, don't want to get into that. Sorry. But they would put them in these boxes because they did not want the Jews of old to infect the new religious faith, to
kind of steer the majority away from Christianity.
Yes, they didn't want them to undermine the Christian faith, especially the church, which gained its power from the amount of followers it had.
So then, Jews were kind of always on the outskirts, and always kind of on the side of they're kind of look at that as the contrarians, of what the modern times we're thinking.
Yes, and so there were many things that Jews could or could not do. So, for example, Jews in certain economic positions could not do certain things. So, if you wanted to be a lawyer, you could only be a lawyer for other Jews, I believe, or you could not step foot outside your ghetto without a pass or without acknowledgement that people around the place knew you and knew you very, very well. And there were only a handful. There were a handful of Jews that were considered court Jews, meaning that they were welcomed into the heights of power of nobility to be their spies and financiers. Because as Jews, they could get a lot more money because they could charge interest. Christians were not allowed to do that at the time. So, nobility of Europe in various forms would take Jews into their fold as individuals, but never as a whole. Until we come to, centuries later, we come to 1792, which is where the Austro-Hungarian emperor decided to what they call emancipate the Jews, which is where they would allow them out of the ghetto, allow them the economic opportunities to compete with other Gentiles, and basically become productive citizens, as the emperor put it, which meant that he could tax them more.
And I feel in those times, they were definitely able to do business with Jewish people and kind of do business, but not also associate themselves within their social constructs, but also kind of do business and kind of use them to their advantage, but not tie themselves socially. If
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Yes, you were separated socially. There were definite barriers that you should not cross. I will say this for the Roman Catholic Church doctrine, which is that I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the Catholic Church doctrine of the time said that they could not, the one thing you could not do to these people, you could separate them, you could treat them badly, but you could not kill them.
Right, and that's where World War II kind of like cut that out, and
Yeah.
made it
Oh yeah.
made it a bigger movement
Yeah.
as exterminating people.
Obviously, there were a lot of other things leading up to that, but the basic premise was you don't kill these people.
Right.
But after during the French Revolution of the late 17th century, 1790s to the 18 teens, you had the French Revolution and Napoleon.
Yeah.
And the French Revolution got rid of their monarch, and they also had a feeling of nationalism and the idea that all men are equal. It went even further than the American Revolution in terms of who is equal, who is not.
Well, nationalism would argue that all men are not equal. Actually,
Mm-hmm. In the French Revolution's case, they tied themselves together by this idea that all men should be equal.
Mhm.
Whether it was true or not, they believed that they should be.
but
And so when other nations invaded to return royalty to the throne, the French were able to gather much larger armies because they did not rely on simply professional armies. Citizens gathered up weapons and fought back. And then Napoleon comes on the scene fairly, I think, in 1802, and basically manages to become king and emperor of France, and does several invasions of different areas. I do not deny that he was a conqueror, but wherever he went and his army stepped foot on, they emancipated the Jews. They said these laws that keep them apart from you, that tell them that they're not allowed to do certain things, we're not going to allow that. They're free. And some Jews were able to take advantage of this, some were not. But once Napoleon was defeated, or wherever his troops left, those same people that had put those Jews there started putting them back in the boxes as fast as they could. And it wasn't until the unification of Germany in 1871 up to 1879, when Germany was unified through conquest, through military actions.
And this is building towards almost World War One
Yes.
to a degree. You know
Yes,
what I mean? Like
actually,
that's where
the unification of Germany actually probably did lead to World War One.
right.
But the Jews were finally fully emancipated. And that's when anti-Semitism was finally coined, actually, the term, because people did not want Jews coming out of their boxes. And the argument against the Jews, the anti-Semites, was that the reason we're having so many problems is that they are out of the boxes. They can compete with us now. They can take professions that we would have had. They are undermining the faith.
And they have somebody to blame for it.
Yes.
You know?
Oh, but again, in Germany, or all across Europe actually, the anti-Semitic people were loud, they were vocal, they were visible, but they never gained more than 5%, 4% of the vote in Germany. And they never got more than 5% of the seats of their parliament, known as the Reichstag. I'm not very good at German. But then we fast forward to World War I, where France wants revenge for what happened during the war with Germany in 1871, where Germany had to fight France to unify, beat them in about 6 weeks, and annex the Rhineland, or the Alsace region, which has some German speakers, some French speakers. And that's the one thing that the Kaiser said of that time said, we are keeping it. Everything else goes back to the French that they want, but we're keeping this place. And that angered the French so much that they were like, we're not going to take that. And they managed to ally themselves with Russia because the new Kaiser, Wilhelm II, managed to piss off the Russians, especially, and the Russians needed money to industrialize, the French offered them money.
So let's fast forward to the end of World War One, and
The Treaty of Versailles.
And pretty much like the Germans were pretty much like crushed economically after this war, right?
Yes.
And they had somebody to blame, and this is where the rise of Hitler comes, and where their economic strife has to be blamed upon somebody, and the Jews were the people to blame.
There is a certain thing to that, yes. Actually, during World War I, right as it was ending in 1918, the German Army Officer Corps actually conducted an investigation to find out how many Jews were fighting within the army, and they were going to use that knowledge to say, not enough Jews are fighting in the army. We're losing because of that. And they actually found that there was a larger proportion of Jews fighting in the army than in the current population, so they squashed that report.
Okay.
But then comes the Treaty of Versailles in 1919, and the two things that the German people did not want was indemnities, which meant they would have to pay a massive war debt,
Mm-hmm.
and to lose certain territories. And they got an added bonus that, oh, and you're also to blame for the war. It's entirely your fault.
Mm-hmm.
So the Versailles Treaty completely wrecked the German economy very quickly. They lost so much territory, and now, of course, they are humiliated. They've been told by their Kaiser that they're winning the war, by their newspapers they're winning the war, and then all of a sudden there's a coup that gets rid of the Kaiser at the very end because he won't surrender. And so they blame this new republic, they blame the Allied powers, but especially they say, we blame the Jews. At least some of them did.
Mm-hmm.
And then Hitler attends one of these he goes to an inn in Bavaria, I think, and there's this one guy in the bar who talks about Bavarian separation, meaning take Bavaria out of Germany. And Hitler gets up and just berates the man, and he gets huge applause for it,
Mm-hmm.
and he realizes his moment as a speaker. And so Hitler already hated the Jews. People say it's because he was rejected as an artist, and he blamed that four Jews were part of the board that dismissed him rather than him being a bad artist. I don't know whether that's true or not. All I know is he hated the Jews. He really hated them with all of his being. And then he basically becomes the national spokesman and leader of the Nazi Party. And people say that he's a National Socialist. And yes, but I believe that he took the term socialist so that he could appeal to certain working classes, because that was where the Nazis were weakest. They didn't have a lot of popularity among the working class. He had a lot of popularity among the poor and the rural class because it was very easy to tell them that this is not your fault. The war, losing, he had a broad
Agreed.
space. But
No,
his anti-Semitism was unique in the fact that he believed that all Jews were to blame.
No, when you're economically crippled as Germany was after World War One, and you come up like Hitler did, is like, okay, these are the people that are the cause of your suffering,
Yep.
and now naturally we have to get up and move against these people and take our country back and be proud and pretty much like push forward and take everything back for our country.
You're
and
absolutely right.
Because we are the ones that should rule the world. They felt like they should rule the world.
You're absolutely right. That is exactly his message.
And that was his message, even though it's not true.
Yep.
But that was his argument, and a lot of people felt like national pride. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, like we do deserve to control things. Like we have been like, you know, have like the dirty end of the stick our whole time. You know, like, and we got to take it back. And that's where like they took that belief in like Jews can, you know, just do what they want to do as long as we can do business and whatever. But it's like, no, as long as we don't kill them. But now it's like, no, we have to eliminate them. It's just Germany against the world, and if we don't cut them off before they hurt us, they're going to take over and hurt us. And that's what he argued.
Yes, you're right. Although there is a little bit of a historical context, which is that Hitler wanted Jews out of Germany, and he believed that was what needed to happen. Get rid of the Jews of Germany however you can. He wanted them to emigrate. He wanted them to leave. Obviously, they weren't allowed to take any of their property or their money, but they had to leave. But then the Nazis believed that they needed more living space. They needed to have more land. They needed to have more territory. But the more territory they seized, the more Jews that became part of Germany. That's a contradictory goal right there. They're trying to gain more land, but they also want to get rid of more Jews. And so finally, Hitler comes to power. He gets rid of the Jews of Germany as much as he can. He can't get rid of them all. He annexes Austria. He tries getting rid of them there. People won't take the Jews from other countries because the Great Depression is hitting everybody, and there is a great amount of anti-Semitism throughout the world. And the United States, we were the ones that took in the most people. We took in 225,000 Jews, and that was it. We took in the most. But we still didn't take in as many as we could. We actually had a quota system where we could have taken more Jews, but the State Department, I believe, didn't want more Jews because there were people in charge who were anti-Semitic, people who didn't want more Jews. And the population of the United States, there were Gallup polls done on college students saying, do you think that what the Germans are doing to the Jews are bad? Like 73% would say absolutely. Absolutely, it's horrible, especially when Kristallnacht happened. But then they would be asked right afterwards, Do you think that the United States should expand their immigration policy and allow more Jews in as refugees? And they would, about 66 to 75% would say no.
Right. And now that we have this anti-Semitic sentiment going on across Europe and especially in Germany,
Yep.
and my biggest argument was, well, not argument, but my biggest question was that why didn't any of these other countries, step in there and try to stop it, or at least like take sides on it and just allow it to happen?
Well,
Like, why do you believe that they allowed it just to happen?
There's-
Is it a cultural and
It-
religious? I think it's mainly due to religious, beliefs and foundations and
there is so many different answers to that because every country was different. Some countries allied themselves with the Third Reich, like Hungary, and they didn't deport their Jews right away. They didn't get rid of them right away. In fact, they refused in some cases. And Italy, especially, they were the number one ally of Germany for a long time.
Well,
And
Mussolini.
he
Mussolini.
absolutely refused to give up his Jews because he believed that was a ploy of the Catholic Church, who he hated. So those were the two main allies of Germany, other than Japan. And Japan, I don't believe, had a large Jewish population.
No,
I don't think so.
I don't believe so either.
But when it comes down to it, especially in Eastern Europe, but also across Western Europe, the Jews were defined by being Jewish citizens of that country. They were not described as simply citizens of that country. They were known as the Jews of this country. And all these different countries were asking the United States and other countries to take their Jews away.
I think it's always been the case in wherever Jews, lived in any country, they weren't ever, citizens, but just Jewish citizens.
Exactly.
And they've always been like, kind of like marginalized and put to the side.
Yep, you're absolutely right. And we do the same. We've done the same thing here in America for a long time. African Americans, Asian Americans. Now, obviously, that we hold that up as a source of pride to a certain extent today, but it was what we used to do.
Well, even like during the times of like war, like we didn't want anything to do with Japan, especially when we have a war with Japan, and essentially drop bombs on them,
Well, Japan attacked us.
It
was a surprise attack during negotiations,
Right.
and then they launched a surprise attack. They killed, I think, 2,500 to 3,000 of our men, and
We're talking about Pearl Harbor, correct?
yep, Pearl Harbor. But Japan also wanted to rule East Asia. They wanted to, and the way they would do that is through military might and naked violence, and especially against other Asians, especially the Chinese. They really, Jesus H. Christ, it was.
Well, that's why like
horrifying.
politics always like would always spin, racism against other cultures, that are because of like political warfare that's about to go down,
the
political
reason
strife.
the reason we look at the Nazis so much in the West is because we identify with Germany more than we do Japan. Because as a Americanized, America is considered a Western democracy, and we look at things through a Western lens. And so we identify more with Germany than we do Japan.
Sure.
And that's why what they did seems so horrible, because these are supposed to be a civilized, cultured, well-to-do, academic, just civilized people. And yet they did this abominable, unbelievable, horrific thing to their fellow human beings of the same civilized nature. Why? And the only reason they did it is because they were Jews. And because they believed that the Jews were the enemy of Germany. And so Hitler comes to power in 1933. He's made chancellor, so he's not the head of state yet. But because he has the largest party and there's no coalition government, as chancellor he's allowed to rule by decree. That's something in the German parliament at the time. So he issues these decrees that essentially dismantle a lot of his political enemies, throw a lot of them in jail, and then eventually he's able to get rid of Jewish citizenship, Jewish rights, forcing Jews to leave without their money, without their property as much as possible. And then you come to Kristallnacht of 1938, where the world sees in the headlines this massive pogrom against Jews at the time. And so people across the world are horrified, they're disgusted. But at the time, even today, there's still a little bit of a let, but back then especially, the idea of one nation interfering in the domestic problems or domestic issues of another country was considered somewhat taboo. Like you could issue proclamations and everything, but you weren't allowed to interfere. It's not like we put economic sanctions on Germany anymore. We did it with Japan because Japan was attacking some of our allies.
So my answer to the question of like why didn't anybody else step in and try to either sympathize or try to stop the attack on Jews is because like I said, like we said earlier, we agreed earlier that there weren't always citizens of that certain country. There were always Jewish citizens of that country.
That is
so they're
one
always
reason.
left to their
And
left to their own. So of course they're not really our citizens. They're their own people. They kind of separate themselves from us, or we've separated them from us, and we don't really care because they're not really part of our of our culture. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So I think that led to that's what really led to like this to really go on until America stepped in. Obviously.
That is part of it. That is part of it. But it also comes down to every country was different, but it also came down to what were the priorities for that country. And if saving Jews was not a priority, which most of them were not a priority, they always had something better to do. Every country had something more important to do.
Because they were always scattered amongst in their own communities and
not
little
just
communities.
that. Yeah. I mean, like the city of Budapest in Hungary, that's the capital of Hungary. In 1944, that's when the final extermination of the Jews of Hungary began, and it was done against almost all the Jews of the rural Hungary, almost all the Jews of the rural area of Hungary, which were usually in those little villages separate from everybody, were gathered up and killed, deported on trains to Auschwitz. And then Budapest's turn came up, and Admiral Horthy, the nominal head of state of Hungary at this point, says that the deportations have to stop. But the Germans managed to get a march going of the Budapest Jews. Now, why would Admiral Horthy speak up for those Jews but not the Jews of rural Hungary? And it's because people have theorized that he believed that the Jews of Budapest were actually people like Hungarian citizens, because they acculturated themselves. They were cosmopolitan. They were part of Hungary in a way that the Jews who were separated and had their own, the Hasidic Jews, the ones that did not change their clothes to match the rest of the people who kept their accents, people who followed Yiddish, all this stuff.
Right, they kept their traditions, of course.
Yeah, so the cosmopolitan Jew, which is why a lot of German Jews were not killed right away when the Holocaust began. They were sent away to a place called Riga, and that was in Poland. And when when Germans heard the message about them being shot, they were like, "What the hell are you doing? You can't do that. Those are still German Jews."
So now that World War II catapulted all these anti-Semitic ideologies and beliefs, magnified them. Post World War II and fast forward to modern times now, what would you say is kind of like holding on to those anti-Semitic ideologies now?
Well, the people.
What would you say keeps people like kind of like grasping those things? Is it because of power? Because of who has
politics.
the money and who? Yeah, politics too, but also
no, it is politics. It comes down to who do you think is to blame for your troubles, if anyone.
But that's always been the original argument.
But that's the thing. Many of us need someone to blame because we can't blame ourselves. Otherwise,
you need a scapegoat, sure.
Yeah, but it also comes down to politics, basically. People who have a political agenda, whether they say it's their political agenda or not. So, and one reason you could look at it is Holocaust denial.
Mm-hmm.
People who were soldiers in World War II fought the Nazis, fought the Japanese, fought the Italians, fought the Hungarians, the Romanians, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of these camps were uncovered. And they got it on film. They got the testimony from Germans who participated willingly.
Mm-hmm.
And people still deny it. And they say there's no way it happened. All these Jews are part of a conspiracy to get more money out of us because we're supposed to feel sorry for them going through what they did.
That's a good point.
And then they'll say that the Jews are the financiers of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll also argue that Hitler wasn't that bad a guy, that he actually was trying to keep the Jews from being killed.
Well, this is where capitalism and socialism kind of ties into this conversation, to where, there's this big belief that, Jews control everything. You know what I'm saying? Here in America, they control the media, they control, the banks, they control
Hollywood.
the money, they control Hollywood. And to me, capitalism is like, okay, if you are a group of people and you help each other out, and you put yourself in a position of power to kind of make money, you're also going to be the enemy, and I think that's where like socialism always is going to blame people who were smarter and made better decisions than you did and others did, and now they're in a position of power to control things, and now you blame them. But like, well, no,
Well, you're forgetting.
they're taking from us. They didn't do this like by they believe that they didn't do this by natural means. They took it from somebody,
You
and
gotta-
that's where socialist ideologies kind of like start to tear down people who made better decisions.
I don't want to tie capitalism and socialism too much into this because.
Okay.
uh,
Well,
you
and
can be-
to a degree, it makes sense though.
But here's the thing, it's not people who are capitalists and are smart and do these things. That's one thing, but
I think Jews were very capitalist and smart. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like
that's not much of a compliment, dude. Don't trust me. That's a compliment I've heard about Jews.
It's not. You don't think it's a compliment? I think it is a compliment.
Not much of
actually.
one, I said.
Oh, okay. I think it is a compliment. You know what I'm saying? Because like the stronger always survive. The smarter always survive, and it doesn't mean
Not
that it
necessarily.
doesn't mean that you're exploiting somebody to gain.
It's not
it just
about
means
ex-
that you're making smarter moves.
But you're misunderstanding something.
Okay.
Any group of people can become powerful through that stuff. It can be any little group of people coming together or any large group
For
of people.
sure.
And socialism isn't attacking people for being smart and coming up with great ideas and great investments and
To a degree, I think they do.
but they're not blaming them for that. What they do blame people is people who practice what we would call unethical ideas.
Okay.
And not just ideas, but also like, well, you've become this great powerful person or group of people through these means,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're shutting the door behind you to keep other people out because you want to benefit yourself. Which
Well, I think culturally, like amongst everybody in every different culture, we're definitely like as human beings ingrained to help out the people
Closest
that
to us.
are like us.
Yeah.
Closer to we're very tribal to a degree. Like
Yeah.
so, Christians help other Christians out, Jews help other Jews out, Muslims help other Muslims out, and they're not gonna elevate somebody else to another power. You know what I mean? Like I think it was Machiavelli that said like when you help somebody else, rise to power, like you ruin yourself in the end.
that's a very cynical view, and
And that's no,
and
I'm
it's
just
a
quoting,
very pro- but
I'm
it's a
quoting
predo-
Machiavelli, but yeah.
But here's the thing: it's a very predominant view.
Mhm.
That's exactly what
Correct.
racism, anti-Semitism. It all stems down to one little thing, which is that it's the idea that somebody outside of you, outside of who you are familiar with, outside of your power base, is in charge,
Mm-hmm.
and that means that you're losing out. If you're not on top, then somebody else is on top of you. And in
Like-
reality, that's not the case anymore. I mean, yes, it's
No,
still,
it still is because like I'll give you the example like okay, whenever I meet like another Hispanic person, you know what I'm saying? They're like we're already automatically brothers in their eyes. You know what I mean? They're like what's going on? Like we got to help each other out. Da 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 da. Like we're victims in this whole cultural war. Especially in America. We have like a melting pot of so many different cultures and religious beliefs, and like everybody's like we got to stick together and help each other out. And anybody else who isn't like us is the enemy. So if you're a Hispanic, Catholic, you know what I mean, like immigrant, you're going to help others in that box out. You know what I mean? And Americans, or should I say white Americans, are feeling like, oh, they're losing their country, because of all these immigrants coming in and trying to like impose their ideas on you and their values on you, where everybody ends up having, racist ideologies and kind of like pushing each other away and kind of fighting it and blaming each other for why they're losing.
Yeah, I definitely see that. You've got a very good point. And unfortunately, there's not too much we can do to escape that except to try to understand that equality between each other means reaching across that aisle and saying, hey man, you and I, our skin colors are different, our beliefs are different, but guess what? We can agree to disagree no matter what, and we can live in harmony.
But most people have lost the ability to do that, especially with having a discussion. I mean, I look at politics in America right now.
I don't
it's
trust the
like-
politicians today.
I don't
That's
either.
for sure.
You and I talk about politics all the time, and it's like we're so divided, but they both do the same thing
For
to
them,
get
it's a
their goal
game.
across.
For the
It's a game.
politicians and the political parties, for the majority of them, not all of them, it's just a game. It's not like they're actually at odds with each other in their minds. Because they're already there. They're already at the top. What do they need to worry about? The only thing holding them together is the fact that they hold the power.
It's pretty much like trying to divide the people, but only doing for people like yourself. Like we both talked about. We spoke on the the $15 minimum wage, and then we said why the Senate didn't back it and vote
Yeah.
it. You know what I mean? because they're funded by these corporations that are rich like them.
Yep.
So they're not going to piss off, you know what I'm saying, the people that are shake, what is it, shake the apple cart, you know what I mean?
Yeah, they're not going to piss off the people that are giving them their money
exactly,
for the
because
campaigns.
again, even though they're saying that they're part of, that they're for the working people, you're not the working people though, dude. Like you're not the blue collar working American that you so called say you're fighting for, and then when you vote, you don't vote for what you said you were going to vote for, and it's all just a facade and a bunch of bullshit and a bunch of pandering to just get votes and then ultimately save your own ass with your own with your own tax breaks. And it comes down to the same thing with thank you. And it all comes down to the same thing like culturally. Like you're only going to move people up that are like yourself. If you're rich, you're going to help the rich. If you're a Christian, you're going to help Christians. If you're Muslim, you're going to help Muslims, so on and so forth. So that's the biggest problem that exists within our society with that regard. And these anti-Semitic ideas are going to exist. These racist ideas, towards African Americans are going to exist
because we have to justify it.
Exactly, and Christian and Muslim and all these wars that are fought, because of religious faith and belief, are going to exist. And I don't know how we can change that. We have to change ourselves.
We have to do it
mentally. You have to reprogram yourself, but at the same time, you can't reprogram people to live outside of that tribal bubble.
I think that the way you do that is through so many different ways. There's so many individual. There's no one way to do it. There's no two ways to do it. There's so many different ways as individuals. Like, for example, you and I met because we work where we work, and we became friends because of our discussions.
I heard you talking one day, and I just jumped in on it, and then here we are having videos and shit.
Yeah, I should.
Excuse my language, but yeah.
I could have said to you, "Piss off, you damn," or whatever. Sorry.
You are racist, dude. Like Jews are racist, bro. Like, dude, Jews are racist. I'm starting a channel.
I could have told him that, but I said, "Really, you want to have a discussion? Come on."
No, for sure.
Because
like I said,
I valued what he was saying, his intellect, more than I cared about what skin color he was. And it's because I live in America partly. It's also because I wasn't raised to think in terms of skin color. I mean, obviously you notice skin color, but you don't let it dominate your actions. That's the difference. So,
but not everybody's going to be like us, to where like we just hear ideas and we have a discussion about it. Most people actually want to live in that bubble where they have that echo chamber of like, you agree with me, so we're going to get along. Where you and I, we don't necessarily agree on everything, but we can agree to disagree and have a philosophical discussion on these things, and pretty much like try to break it down piece by piece and try to piece it together, you know what I'm saying, because we both actually want to understand it and not just be like, oh my god, like we think so alike. It's like, no, we want to understand why America and why people around the world feel this way. And anti-Semitic, you know what I'm saying, anti-Semitism is all bullshit. Racism is all bullshit.
Really?
It really comes down to, of course it is. You know this.
Oh yeah.
But a lot of people like fail to get outside of that bubble to where again you have things like the KKK and people Nazis. You know what I mean? And then you have religious people who all want to stick together with their ideologies and blame somebody else for their problems.
Yep.
Racists want to blame immigrants, and they want to blame black people for why their plight is going wrong. Instead of like looking at themselves and be like, what am I doing wrong?
Yep.
And that's what we're going to do away with that. But once we do that. Until we do that, then we'll never actually get along.
Well, I don't think we'll ever fully get rid of it. I really don't.
At all. No, I definitely agree with that.
What we need to do is marginalize it and shame it to the corners of society where if they want to live in their tiny little Damn.
No, go ahead.
I opened that can of worms.
Yeah, you did.
But basically, we want to marginalize those voices. We want to force them into the corners that they deserve, which is, shanties and trailer parks and sewers, because that's where those views crawl out of. And if you want to espouse those views, then you can live where those views exist.
And to add to that, like the way that you and I, are getting these discussions going on, is the way that you break those barriers. And like the only thing I have to tell you people is that. Step outside of your box, man. Get to know people that don't have the same religious views as you, that don't have the same cultural, aspect and views that you do, and get to know them and ask them why, and just have a conversation, and pretty much just discuss those things and try to understand why they feel that way, as opposed to just saying I'm right, like having that arrogant, looking with your nose down at people and just be like, oh, I'm better than you. But it's like, well, why? Like change my mind. Like let's talk about this instead of getting upset and just shutting it down, just be like, no, this person will never understand how I feel. You don't know that. Like, talk to that person.
I absolutely agree. There's very few exceptions where having an open discussion is going to backfire. It will usually work. It will.
And do not listen to these politicians.
And don't. Nah.
Do not listen to these politicians telling you what to think and how to think, and get to know if you're a Democrat, get to know your fellow Republican and get to understand them. You know what I'm saying?
And if you're a Republican,
vice versa.
get to know your fellow Democrats.
And vice versa, exactly. Like, but don't just sit there and judge these people based on just short-sighted, fucking face value, ideas. Really step out the box and talk to people. And
Yes.
I see it happen. I'm seeing it happen every day. Like, I'm a little bit let down when I look at the news, but then when I see people in society and people in the break room, like we have a lot of Republicans and Democrats, like in the break room when we talk. And they start to step outside the box and talk to each other, and they start to agree that maybe these politicians are lying to us.
Yeah, and it's no different than it was the same in Nazi Germany, where the politicians all lied. I mean, yes, the difference is sometimes they had principles of different parties, and sometimes they really believed in what they were saying. Whereas today, I don't know how many of them believe in what they're saying. A lot of them, I don't think they care. They're just there to maintain their positions and not change anything. They are there to abuse their power however they want to. Like you've heard recently about a certain Republican who's being investigated for a sex scandal. Sex with a 17-year-old. I will not mention his name because he does not.
Which one? There's so many. There's so many.
But going back to the subject at hand, kind of, the anti-Semitism of today is more about the idea that Jews are in control of so much and that they are the puppet masters. You puppet dance, puppet dance, puppet dance. And first of all, if there's a string I can grab onto, please let me know. But in reality,
and if you do, hook me up, man. You know what I'm saying? Don't leave this. I'm Hispanic. All right, I guess.
Well, no, Catholic.
No, I'm not. I'm atheist, sir. But
same here.
There we go. See,
we got more in common than people think.
You won't know.
But basically, it comes down to the anti-Semitism of today is more the idea that Jews are either the financiers of the world or they're brought their own miseries on themselves because they caused the problem. So what we do to them is justified because they've already victimized us because of what they've done. So you're making yourself a victim to lash out at them. And it's no different than the racists, it's no different than the homophobes, the transphobes, whatever you want to
very well put.
Phobe of any kind.
That's right on the nail, dude. Like, yes, perfect. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. And again, like, until we get outside of those boxes, then we will continue to just kind of like, be crabs in a bucket and just.
I'd like to bring up one more point about anti-Semitism, which is that not all the people who are anti-Semites are thinking in this very logical, thoughtful way. Most of the time they just hate Jews for being Jews and that they deserve what's coming to them, and that some of them actually believe the Holocaust happened, but that it was a good thing. Like, I don't know if you guys have heard of this father. He heard that his son attended the rally at Charlottesville. The father learned about this, and when he did find out, he wrote a letter to the public saying that he had disowned his son.
I heard about that one. I read about that.
And he spoke about, and other people who knew him, who knew the boy, spoke about how they went on a field trip with him to Auschwitz. And when they visited the gas chambers, he would say things like, "This is where the magic happens."
Wow.
Yeah. So the anti-Semites in large numbers do believe the Holocaust happened. They just think it was a good thing and that Hitler didn't finish the job. And unfortunately, people like that have a tendency to, what they look for is a ruthlessness of strength that the rest of us balk at. And it's a good thing we do, because if we didn't, we wouldn't be much better than animals.
Let's say, hypothetically speaking, right? Hitler was to carry out his mission and exterminate Jews. There's going to be another enemy after that.
Absolutely.
There's somebody else that's oppressing your country and taking, from you. But there's always going to be an enemy. Like, you know what I'm saying? Whether it's Jews, the next time it's going to be the Russians. You know what I'm saying? There's going to be, the Catholics or whatever. You're always going to blame somebody.
Communists, socialists.
Communists, all that. And it exists. And we're never going to do away with that.
Even though you're the one doing the oppressing.
Yeah, and you're also like kind of creating these problems for yourself at the same time. You know what I'm saying? To make yourself seem more heroic and kind of like you're trying to take your country back from the enemy. You know, you're
Yeah,
the victim, they're the enemy, and you're always going to blame somebody for oppressing you when you're really doing the oppressing.
yeah, yeah, basically.
And
And so that's what modern day anti-Semitism is, all the way back from the times of the Christians saying we need to separate ourselves from these people. We don't want them to infect
hell,
our faith. We don't want to kill them, but we don't want them to be around us.
I mean,
All the way up to they're being emancipated, they're being freed. Now they're competing with us. Now they're becoming like us. Now we're losing out. And the reason we're having all these economic problems is because we let them out of the boxes. And then comes World War II, where this society has been geared up to hate people, to become killers, and to defend their nation through whatever means possible. And the enemy they have to face is Jews.
and this
Not
is
not armed men in the field, not a navy, but innocent human beings, babies, the disabled, elderly.
and this is why like we need to do our next video should be on religion, the hottest topic, you know what I'm saying, out there right now, because you know everybody's always, you know, I think the world and especially America has been a very Christian, you know, driven idea. And anybody who wasn't, you know, Christian was always like, you know, pushed to the side or always looked at as an enemy,
Yep.
especially for modern day anti-Semitism in America. And also, you know, now you have this Islamophobia, you know, with terrorism and
Yep.
things like that. So it's always come down to religion at the root of it, I think. You know, not just socially, but also globally. You know, like we're always going to be tribal towards like religion, and you're always gonna. And again, America's always been relatively Christian and just Christian driven. And you always use the Bible for manifest destiny and for why you deserve to take somebody else's shit. I'm being very, you know, very direct and
Yeah.
short.
We
But
left
yeah,
out
like
slavery.
there you go. Slavery too. Slavery was always justified by the Catholic Church, you know. And it's there in black. It's very black and white. If you go open the Bible and read it, you will see it justifies a lot of sexist, racist, you know, homophobic ideologies based on like, you know, how you should think and
Yep.
why you shouldn't be you.
I would say that religion plays a humongous part in everything that went on in history, and I think it still plays a certain role. I just hope that that role will be diminished more and more as time goes on. I don't think it'll go away in my lifetime. I hope I can see it put on the footnotes of history eventually by the end of my life, but we'll see.
I mean, my cynical outlook on life is
The power of religion, I should say, the power.
Sure, the power of it. Yeah, definitely. And my cynical outlook on it will definitely, I definitely think that it won't go away, not in my lifetime at least, and maybe not even in decades after I'm gone. But there is a possibility of people can start being free thinkers and think for themselves and get out of these tribal, you know, boxes.
Yep.
But
I hope so. I think there's a chance. I just think it's not going to be overnight, and it's going to be through individuals rather than through nations.
groups, exactly.
Yeah. So I hope we had a good discussion. What do you think?
I thought it was a great discussion, man. I always have a good time on your channel, and guys, tune in again. We're gonna, you know, have a good.
After the next video, after we do our religious one, which I'm not going to do very well on, we should do
I
something.
think you will.
We should do something a little more light.
I think this guy doesn't give himself enough credit about how well read he is on history and religion, but I try my best, you know, to keep up, and I think it'll
Do
it'll
your
be a
best,
very,
dude. You keep up
it'll
word
be-
for word.
It'll be a very good discussion. I know it will, and
Yeah.
I always enjoy coming on here, and you guys just tune in, man. I hope you guys enjoyed it.
All right. Smash that like button, subscribe, and share, please. Take care, guys.